So, in his travels around Galilee, Jesus has arrived back in his hometown of Nazareth, described as the place he was brought up. It's the place where he was provided with food and nourishment by his mother and his father. It's where he grew up and flourished physically. But also, I suspect, it was where he grew up and flourished spiritually. Because when it's the Sabbath, Jesus does what he's always done. He goes to the synagogue. But on this occasion, when there, he stands up to read as he's handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He's no longer just one of those sitting. He's now one who stands with authority. And he opens up the scroll and he chooses the place where he wants to read from. He chooses the place where he wants to read from. In this simple act, we see the customs and the habits of Jesus. He's one who, like us, regularly participates in the religious life of his community. And like some of us, he's a reader who contributes to the reading of Scripture in worship. And like a few of us, he is a teacher who helps the people to understand what they are reading. It's most likely that those who knew Jesus from this time, growing up in the same town, were not surprised by his ability to read Hebrew. It was part of his life, just as our reading of Scripture on a daily basis, hopefully, is part of our life. But I suspect that even they will have been surprised by his newfound confidence, his newfound authority. The passage that Jesus chooses to read is from that Old Testament prophet Isaiah. And he reads that quotation that refers to the Spirit of God, the same Spirit who brought him back to Nazareth, the same Spirit that sustained him in the wilderness, the same Spirit that was to sustain him throughout his ministry. And in this quotation, the Spirit of the Lord is resting on the speaker for the purpose of proclaiming good news to the poor, to those who are economically disadvantaged and marginalized. In addition to the poor, as a broad group, good news is also proclaimed to specific groups of people. Prisoners, the blind, and the oppressed, all of whom could be described as being poor. Not perhaps monetarily poor, but poor. And Jesus says, reflecting on Isaiah as he reads it, that it's the year of God's favor. The year of God's favor describes the Jubilee year, when God will restore Israel. Good news for the poor. It's the first mention of the poor in Luke's Gospel. Although already we've seen that the powerful and rich are sent empty away while the hungry are filled with good things. In Luke chapter 1, that great proclamation as Jesus is brought into the temple and held as a baby and recognized for who he is. Suggestion here at the very beginning of Luke's gospel is that those who are at the bottom of society's ladder are the Spirit's chosen recipients of the good news. And as the gospel unfolds, as we read it through the next coming weeks, we will see that the poor will be identified as worthy hearers of the good news, as recipients of God's kingdom, as a sign of Jesus' ministry, as invitees to the kingdom feast. The good news that Jesus proclaims, and thus the good news that Christians proclaim afresh today, must be good news for the poor. Yes, to the economically disadvantaged, but also to the marginalized in our society. But not to them alone. In chapter 25 of Leviticus, the Jews are instructed that every 50th year was to be set aside as a time of liberation and restoration, a time when all Israelites would return to their ancestral home, a time when the poor were not to be taken advantage of, nor taken as slaves, but rather they were to be treated as hired hands and released on the year of Jubilee. It was a time of freedom, new beginnings. It was Jubilee, a restoration. That was the passage that Jesus chose to read. And when he finishes reading, he does something very important. It's something you just pass over. 3 words. He sits down. He sits down. And why it's important is because that shows him taking the usual posture of a teacher. So we shouldn't be surprised that they fixed their eyes on him to hear what he had to say. And so he begins to explain the scriptures by telling them that today, when they heard that scripture from Isaiah read, it was being fulfilled in their presence. Jesus is saying nothing less than that he himself is the location for the fulfillment of this prophecy. In the power of the Holy Spirit, Jesus is the one who has been chosen or anointed to preach and proclaim the good news of God. And in the following chapters, Jesus will travel from town to town, and wherever he goes, he will teach, and he will heal, and he will live out this good news so that people can see that salvation has come that day to Israel. It's the beginnings of the fulfillment of all that they had looked forward to and hoped for. But put yourself in that congregation, listening to Jesus that day. His hometown congregation, filled with all the characters of the village, just like this congregation is filled with all sorts of characters. They would be rich and they would be poor. There would be those who could see and perhaps those whose eyesight was failing. There would be those who felt oppressed. And there might even be those who were oppressors, not good managers or owners of land. And ask yourself what this liberation will have looked like to them. What were each of them expecting? Did they anticipate the good news would come first to the poor, the prisoner, and the oppressed? Or did they pass over that bit of scripture? Did they think it would come first to those who were with connections, those who were rich, those who were outwardly, yes, religious, the leaders? Will they hear it and receive it as good news to be shared with all, especially the vulnerable? I wonder. Or will they hear it and hope that it's a message for them alone? Especially if they were in a position of authority and leadership, especially chosen. Or did their hope extend beyond that? Did this message of hope extend beyond that synagogue? Did they see it as a message of hope for the world? I suppose in some ways the same questions could be directed to us. Do we anticipate this good news that we celebrate comes first to the poor, the prisoner, and the oppressed? Or do we think it will come first to those with inside connections, the rich and the religious? I'm reminded of my first training vicar, way back in the 70s. He'd come out of a Brethren church. Now, if you know anything about the Brethren church, not that many years ago, they even had rope around the chairs. And those who were inside the rope were the chosen ones. So if you came in as a visitor, you were outside of the rope. Do we think that this good news is only for those on the inside? Or do we hear it and receive it as good news to be shared with all, and especially the vulnerable? Do we hear it and hope that it's just a message for us alone? Are we hoping that as members of the good old Church of England, we will receive special favour, exclusive favour, like the brethren? Or does our hope extend to the whole world? to the people of Biddulph, the people of Siongila and Tungu, of Kalifi, of Hong Kong, of Russia, Afghanistan. Does our hope extend to the whole world? Two 2,000 years ago, when Jesus sat down to teach in the synagogue, to begin his public ministry to his own people, in his own community, we are told that all spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. "Isn't this Joseph's son?" they asked. There was something about Jesus on that day and at that time in his ministry that touched the hearts and the minds of the people. But we also know that it wasn't very long before people's opinions about Jesus changed, to the point that, as Luke tells us, they got up, drove him out of the town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built, in order to throw him off the cliff. But Luke tells us he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. Fulfilling the prompting of the Holy Spirit to be a witness wasn't easy for Jesus. To be a witness, especially to the poor, to the disadvantaged, to the lowly, was not a message that was well received by the rich, by those in authority, by those in high places. And I simply want to suggest this morning, it's never easy. But if we want to be encouraged and responsive to the Spirit's nudging, then this account in Luke's Gospel should encourage us in the task of taking this good news to the poor in our street, in our town, to the rich and to the poor alike, to follow Jesus' example. It's not easy. It's never been easy. And it never will be easy. But we know that in Jesus we have an example of one who was faithful to his calling from the very beginning of his ministry. As he sat there teaching in his hometown, to the point of hanging on the cross, proclaiming the good news for the poor in spirit, as well as the poor financially. This is good news for all. And we have the privilege of following in his footsteps as being those who share this good news with our community and with our world. May we, like Jesus, be faithful. Amen.